So I immediately move into the other one. There'll be two speakers. My name is Sunil Mehta. I look after the business of Quint in India, Middle East, and Africa. And I'll be joined by my colleague Sandeep, who is the consulting director for us, and he's the one who would take you through the journey on the alignment part. A quick introduction about Quint. We started our journey globally in 1992, and all those who remember ITIL, ITIL was also registered in the year 1992 as a registered trademark. So ITIL was one of the first best practice that we had picked up, and we started training and implementing on these best practices. Obviously, ITIL has evolved over the years. What the procedures and processes were there at that time obviously has undergone a transitional shift, and we are now talking about the latest, which is the ITIL4 in the series. Apart from ITIL, we also do a lot of other stuff, and this is what I'm going to explain in terms of the challenges that we try to solve for the organization. One of the first one, which is where ITIL fits in quite perfectly, is how best to organize your IT and how best to manage your IT. So this is where all the practices, the processes, the efficiency, the governance, the metrics, all those things are a pretty important aspect to it. The second area is about business IT and business IT alignment, how business and IT need to work together to ensure value is delivered to the end customer. So you'll see a little bit of glimpse of this also in ITIL4, but this is a big area, a big challenge still. And it was the same thing that when I started my journey with IT in 1989, we had the same issue of business IT alignment. And today, after almost 30 years, we are still talking about the same challenge, same issue, same concerns. So it's an ongoing thing. As you know, things change quite often. The third area is innovation, and how do we innovate and make things more, I would say, efficient and effective as we go along. So innovation is a pretty big area that we're working on. Then from a transformation on a performance area, as you know, everybody is talking about a performance enhancement, whether it is in the area of process or practice or efficiency or people or skills or resources, etc. So that's another area that we're working on. And obviously data and anything around data, the whole data science philosophy is the key now from a digital transformation perspective, and that's a big area as well. And last but not the least is the digital transformation, putting all of it together, again, which makes sense to the customer. They get value, they get faster response, they get better change management, and so on and so forth. So the whole thing puts together. Now, if you compare this with ITIL4, it took them time. It took Exelos about 8 years, but they really changed the whole context of ITIL V3 to 4, and it's a transformation change. It'll take some time to understand and settle down, because anything which is majorly changed takes a little bit of time to. So you see a lot of positive and a lot of negative discussions going around in terms of how really you align to ITIL4 and how easy or difficult it would be. So today's webinar is trying to respond to some of those queries and try to see how it could be broken into easy steps which are able to implement and align to ITIL4. Moving forward, this is a little bit on the overall portfolio. Obviously, ITIL is a big portfolio from Exelos, but apart from ITIL, as you know, in ITIL4, they align it to the other best practices as well, whether it is project management or whether it is agile or whether it is DevOps or a little bit on the emerging technologies, which is IoTs and machine learnings. All of it is now moving towards the digital transformation journeys of an organization, and how ITIL4 can really be the supporting pillar from a practice process operations point of view. Moving forward, I'd like to quickly introduce you to the speaker, which is Sandeep Gondlekar. He joined Quint in 2005, one of our first consultant on board in Quint India. He's been part of our international team. He's done implementation on ITIL, COVID, ISO 20000, and a lot of security related projects in India as well as outside of India. He's part of our global team, and I'm happy he was able to put this structure together, this presentation, and kind of unfold what could be a method forward on the ITIL alignment and ITIL4 implementation. So I also give you a quick idea of the overall coverage. So we start with how do we start the ITIL4 implementation journey? What are the typical questions and which are in our mind and what we're trying to solve? What are the starting points and how do I know where I am in that? So basically, as of now, where am I? It's not that you have to start from scratch. You have been working from an ITIL3 perspective or maybe 2 perspective. So some of those systems are already in place. You need not start from scratch. So where am I? What I need to do? What's my priority? That's important to know. How is my existing processes, probably practices, also mapped to ITIL4? Again, skill and resources, very important. Do I need to change a little bit of my skilling? Obviously, with the alignment with DevOps and with Agile, there is a little bit of a kind of a, I would, a broad-based skill requirement. So how do we manage that? And what are the typical key steps involved in aligning to ITIL4? And then how do I obviously add value to customers? Because one of the big things about ITIL4, as you know, is about value, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Before we start the actual thing, there's a little bit of a poll that we like to share with you, just to know who our audience is and how deep do we want to go and how broad we want to go in this. So I'll just like to have a question on the poll, if Neha can facilitate that for all of you. Are you a ITIL4 certified professional? So it'll be on your screen. Just say yes or no. It's just a black and white question. And based on that, we will continue. So while you do this, I will also transfer my control to Sandeep as well. So over to Sandeep.
Hey, thank you, Sunil. Hey, Sunil, can you also make me a presenter? Thank you. Hey, Sunil, can you confirm you can see my screen? Hey, Sunil, can you confirm you can see my screen?
Yes, Sandeep, I can see your screen.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I presume the audience poll is completed by now, Sunil?
Yes, Sandeep. So we displayed the results. 61% of the audience is certified on ITIL4. So it's a senior audience, and 39% are not. So please
Okay,
continue.
thank you so much. So welcome all of you, and thank you, Sunil, for the introductions. I mean, the main point, if you see, when we think about starting any best practice journey, typically you will see that it comes from its legacy implementations. I mean, service management at the end of the day, or for that matter, ITL as a best practice is nothing but a common sense. And it has grown over a period of time, borrowing from various industries. And it is actually applicable to not just the IT or ICT per se, but it is also being applicable to beyond just the IT systems. And at the core or the heart, if you see of any best practice, it's always the principles of improvement, which basically is always generating some or the other value for its customers. And ITL is no different. Whichever version it was in, either the initial versions in V2 at a very early stage in V1, or even the V3 and 2011, and now even 4. Um, Value is still at the core, and that is good to see. Um, One of the important aspects is that I think the ITIL4 has provided a very flexible foundation to integrate multi frameworks and approaches. I think this is very, very important for any best practice which has been brought in the current state. Because the organizations over a period of time have been adapting to the best practices from different domains, and it is of paramount importance that such investment done in such efforts are not only future proofed but also being used as a building block towards new incoming best practices. And I think ITL4 has done that very well. It allows you to integrate multitudes of frameworks and approaches in its operating model. I think the second aspect, I think it distinctly takes into the view is it takes a business view, but at the same time, it completely recognizes the importance of the digital services. If you see, according to the recent statistics, almost 43% of the total types of services delivered worldwide today, almost 43% have already shifted to a digital mode. I mean, that's a very large number. Just a decade back, it was as low as about 17%. And within a decade, it has taken more than 100% lock proof. So I think it's very important that the best practice recognizes such change. And I think last but not least, it's about going end to end. I mean, that's actually I would say, every time a best practice tries to do this, they have to be very facilitative in allowing steps taken in a different way, but still end-to-end view is presented as a single best practice. So I think I like this holistic approach and facilitation of integration of multiple best practices like Agile or like DevOps or service integration management. Many best practices can very well easily fit in. Now, so considering this, that when we want to start ITL4 implementation journey, I presume some of you could be at a very much stage of where V3 implementation is done and it's more than 2 or 3 years old, or it could be just that you are still on V2 and we're going to shift to V3, but now the 4 has already come in, and right from you never tried ITL. So good news is that in all such scenarios, there are ways and means by which ITIL4 can be adapted to and adopted eventually, which will suit for your purpose. So let's take a quick look in terms of when we say about this journey, what exactly has changed? I mean, I'm happy to see that there are already 60% audience is 4 certified. So I think this is easy. But still, for the benefit of those who probably would want to know what is that is new, I think first and foremost is the approach and philosophy has changed. I mean, you understand that in version 2 was really focused on the two key aspects of service delivery and then service support. But whereas V3 took an approach towards the life cycle and 2011 made it more distinct in terms of view coming in from the practitioner. Now, ITIL4 also has changed its approach where it has got three more distinct aspects brought in. One, it has got 4 dimensions, which are kind of, if you want to compare, they were the 4 Ps of service management, but now they have been augmented and presented as 4 dimensions. And at a core, instead of the life cycle approach, now we have a approach of service value systems. I think it's one of the major contribution of ITIL4 because this service value system, which comprises of 5 distinct components, kind of allows you to integrate different best practices. It allows you to facilitate existing good practices, and it also allows you to do a customization which will fit for your sector or for your organization or for your context. So I think this is a good change in approach and philosophy. There's a plenty of focus on collaboration. I mean, if you simply see right from the definition of service, where the value is now co-creation, it's not just being delivered by a how should I say, a service provider to a customer. Right now, right from the definition word go, there is a focus on collaboration. And there is a clear distinct focus on guiding principles. I think one of the great contribution right at the ITL practitioner stage when there were about 9 principles, but now they have been kind of brought into 7 guiding principles. But they have become kind of the foundation stone. They have become the key aspects for any organization to validate that if I want to take a particular route, what should be my guiding principle? And it becomes much, much easier. Um, a good part of the core various practices which are presented, you will be able to easily see that there's a good integration to the agile methodology or the DevOps right up to the core. It provides you to access to microservices team, and it also talks about doing multiple sprints. So it's quite beautifully integrated within the core. Now the processes, I mean, one of the thing which was from the version 3, if you want to see that it was driven by a life cycle, but the life cycle also has a set of processes associated with them. Now these processes have metamorphed itself into the practices. And when I say that, I must give with a pinch of caution, I must say that now processes or practices would not be the right statement. The processes have become much more holistic with the additional dimensions, the 4 dimensions which come in play. So the processes are much more enriched, is how we should see. New practices are being in play. There are distinct new practices which were not part of the initial process sets. They have been introduced. 4 Ps now are augmented and become new dimensions. And very good point, which is last but not least, that governance has been a very, very notably a good construct. There have been distinct definition of risk. There is a distinct definition of value, outcome, output. More and more clarity provided for any organization to undertake this journey. It has become much, much, much more easier. And with that distinctiveness, I think it should become easier for us to kickstart this journey. And as I said, that this is not a laundry list of all changes. I mean, somebody want to see, they will know there will be very further down changes right up to the definition levels. But holistically, these are the changes which matter. And that's what we can see very quickly. Now, so let's say, what is really a starting point, and how do I know where I am today? And the logic is pretty simple. I mean, we have been doing the continuous improvement in the version 3 also, and obviously the baseline or the starting point should be to know where we are. And it's important to know that where we are before we really start an even initiative. And the easiest way is, of course, to start to know from what's the expectation from the best practice and how are we against them. So some of the areas, even if you before start taking this journey, I think are very important to know is that, first of all, does this organization which you work with, either a client organization, if you're a service provider, or if you're an end customer, then your own organization, or if you're just a consultant to another organization, does it really have a mandate for this change? And if so, what is really the trigger for this initiative? I mean, does the organization wants to undertake it because they want to stay current, or does the organization want to do this because there is an business mandate, or there's a trigger coming from business where business has said that you must undertake or be current with the best practices? Or is there a specific reason where the benefits have been derived out of the ITIL4 implementation? That trigger is understanding is very, very important. Do you also know what benefits and outcome I want to achieve? Because best practice by its nature of implementation provides multiple outcomes as well as multiple outputs. And it is quite possible that you or organization or your organization which you are going to work for or working for, they may have a distinct expectation. I mean, it's not really far before, if you look at the sourcing or the era of outsourcing, not sourcing, even outsourcing, cost was definitely an initial trigger. The definite contribution coming from the offsetting of the cost because of the geographical advantage or disadvantage, either way you put it. So definitely, cost was a great consideration when outsourcing began. But over a period of time, cost was not the main consideration. Efficiency, effectiveness, availability of skills, right people with the right mindset, etc. Many more got added. So the same way, when you're embarking on this journey, it's very important to understand what is the benefit I want to achieve and what are the outcomes really I want to make sure that this gets implemented. It's quite easily possible to underestimate the resources required to manage this change. So one must take a quick stock of before embarking on this journey. Do I have the right set of resources? Are they skilled enough? And do I know how many resources would I require? And how do I actually know how many would I require? And what steps I must take before actually undertaking this journey? So you also must be very clear in terms of, if you're using currently a particular tool to do service management, what could be the changes which may happen inside this tool? Or what tool will be additionally required to manage such transition? Can I repurpose my existing tool? Can it be upgraded to a new version? Can I go altogether to a new tool? These are all questions, right from its communication plan, internal, external. These are very important questions, and they must be thought before we start of the journey. It's very important that there's not a miss, because sometimes I would say answers of this question either can delay the implementation journey. In few cases, even a go no go decision maker that we may not want to do this at all also may be true. So these are the initial set of questions. And once you have answers to those, then I think the next point is much easier. And this is a kind of quick overview in terms of in the alignment discovery path, when we want to start, what are the things we would really want to look at? And the first and foremost, I talked about the 4 dimensions. And if you can easily see here, the mapping of the 4P happening here, where you had the people, process, product, and partners. I mean, those are all here. There are people here. There is a process here. There are product in a way of technology here, and partners are already here. But each one of them is kind of augmented with another dimension. Now, people has organization, and then product or technology has got information, and then the partners have suppliers, and as well as the processes have value streams. Now, what's important to understand is that these dimensions are completely permeate through all the components of the service value system, the service value chain, and it impacts all the guiding principles as well. Because there are about almost 6 external factors which are listed here, you can see, and these factors also can influence the implementation or consideration of creation of any of these 4 dimensions. Each of these factors, either eco, social, or tech factor, or legal, environment, and political factors, they can actually impact these 4 dimensions. So one of the important aspects when we are going to take a starting point, we need to understand where are we with the expectation in terms of organization of people. Because if you look in terms of organization, at a very simplistic level, do we really know how our organization is structured? What are the roles and responsibilities do we have? What is the system of authority we have? What kind of communication methodologies are defined? And what exactly is the operating model? It seems a lot of simple words, but actually, when in organizations I work with, when I come to see, there would be many gaps between the cup and the lip. So it's important to understand the organization, or in terms of people, in terms of their competency, in terms of their how should I say, team formation, in terms of their leadership styles and collaboration work. Because today teams have been used to work in silos, and even after implementation of V3, I have seen that people, even their role naming is still like an incident manager or a change manager. So people are still comfortable with labels. People are still comfortable with distinct roles. But when you want to have a collaborative style of working, when you want to form small microservices team, where the roles simply become the caps and you wear those caps on demand as needed, right? So it's important to understand those dimensions. So this is one of the important aspects which must be touched upon during the discovery phase. Then the second aspect you will look in terms of the service value system, and those who are already familiar, they would recognize this, where the entire service value system has got five distinct components, right? You have got a guiding principles which become kind of the cornerstone, and they actually give you complete direction in terms of strategy or the kind of work you want to do, or the kind of structure you must have, or the kind of people or the ethical behaviors you must demonstrate, how you should guard the value. Plenty of things which are embedded in those. And then the governance methodology, where you give a distinct direction to the management, how it is controlled and how it is directed. And then you have the entire service value chain, which basically kind of creates a product or service and makes sure that the value is realized based on the opportunity and demand being generated. It ensures that the value is co-created and delivered. And practices, which I mean, erstwhile you can say processes, but basically these are the organizational resources. And the only difference which you'll see is that previously processes were almost like standalone, and they were performed by a set of specific people. Now here it's heartening to see that it is a service value chain which decides to engage different processes. I mean, each of the component, right from uh, since the demand which comes in, right from its planning or designing or its execution or its improvement, in each of these component can call upon a process or a practice for that matter, as you would want to call it, and get its work done. So practices have become, in the very real world sense, very reusable pieces of components which can be brought together in a value chain, which will basically create a nice service value chain to deliver value to the customer. And continual improvement, of course, is even this journey which we're talking about is nothing but continual improvement, where you continue to meet the expectation of the stakeholder. You are gradually improving the value delivery systems, the value chains, and also the practices and processes along with it. Now, so this will be a second point. So first point we looked at is the four dimensions. And the second point we are going to look in terms of discovery. Where do we stand vis-a-vis each one of these? It's important to understand of the given principles, how many do we really follow? It's important to understand, do we have really a governance structure? Do we really have a set of, value chain defined? These are the important questions in discovery which must be looked at. Another important aspect, I mean, this I'm very sure you guys are familiar with, even during ITIL practitioner, or you would have seen these nine principles, which are now kind of, augmented and brought together into seven. But these are the, again, as I said, that they are the, how should I say, the foundation of thinking, foundation, the way anybody with a service management role and a service attitude should definitely work with. I mean, I'm not going to go, almost going to short of calling it a Bible or a Gita or a Quran. I mean, but it is, as, if not as religious, but it is definitely as ethical and as expected from each of the service management professional to abide by those, because these are the principles which will make sure that you will be able to customize, you'll be able to deliver value using this principle based on your own context. And they encourage improvement all the time. These principles are not, of course, unique to ITL, by the way. You can find these principles in many, many philosophies, such as if you see half of them, you'll easily find it lean or agile or Six Sigma or DevOps or COVID. Each one of these principles have already been present, and it's nice to have them as a foundation principles in this best practice, because it helps us to ensure it's like a how should I say, a lighthouse. If you are confused, if you're uncertain, they can definitely guide you to the right path. They can allow you to integrate multiple best practices together. They can definitely act as a lighthouse in a troubled water. So from the starting standpoint, it's also very, very important to know that how am I doing vis-a-vis each of these principles. Those principles look simple, but they are never definitely easy to implement across the organization. In parts, you can start, but eventually it has to become really the breathing fabric of your organization. It has to get completely integrated with the DNA of your organization, and that certainly can sometimes take a longer time. So these were the three key aspects. I mean, if you look in terms of the four dimensions or the service value systems, and as well as the guiding principles, these are the three key aspects which definitely are important, along with the initial set of questions which I said in terms of is there a management buy-in, and what is that I'm trying to achieve as an outcome, are the key aspects which must be considered when we start our journey. Then if you look at the processes, I mean, my apologies if the screen is very small, because I presume on your screen it could be much, much smaller. So I'm going to read out a bit about a diagram. There are three basically columns. The first column is talking about the general management practices, and these are typically more coming from the, how should I say, the business management domains, but they have been kind of adopted for service management. The second one is very specific, called as service management practices, and these are the very, very, how should I say, IT service management industry-oriented practices. And the last one are called as technical management practices, and these come more from the infrastructure side or technology side, and they have been adopted too. So to answer the question, how are my existing processes mapped? And I mean, I will share my experience when I was getting trained more than a year and a half back, almost last November, that what happened to my processes? Are they going to stay? And I was happy to see some familiar names here. And I'm also very, very happy to see some unfamiliar names here, because definitely these are the additional practices which are missing. I mean, architecture management, very, very core component, which was not available within the V3. Or if you think in terms of workforce and talent management, an equally important component which should have been there, but now it is distinctly there as a practice, which is very good to see. So from the perspective of processes, you can very easily see that though there is a bifurcation in three distinct practice sets, but obviously your processes haven't gone anywhere. They might have been reincarnated and taken a different shape, or they have been shifted. But we must not forget that these processes are not just lifted and shifted here. They are now practices. And when you say they are practices, that means all the four dimensions which we saw just before, they are completely, for every process, have been added with that viewpoint. So now if I think about a change management in terms of change control, I would distinctly have what about the organization and people when you are considering as a change management? What is the role of a partner and suppliers? What is going to be the role of information and technology? Becomes embedded together, and that's why it becomes a practice. It just doesn't remain a process with a workflow, but it becomes a complete practice which can be used and reused whenever you have need in a service value chain. And that's very, very important change of thinking, the way the ITIL4 has, I should say, restructured itself, and it's very heartening to see. So, I mean, this is one of the example when you see this some change management process, or now it's informed change control practice. When you think about a service value chain, it has got distinct activities like plan. How do you use the plan? Then it will be used definitely for planning for new services, or even as simple as policy update. And in case of improvement, I mean, any improvement is eventually a change, and definitely change will be applied everywhere. Or if you are getting into a stage of engage, it must be important that the customer is on board with the change activity. Or design and transition, how would you make sure that its service is being not only just prepared, but it's also transitioned into a live environment, which has to be a good management of change. And during opt-in and build from outside the organization, if it completely expects what must be the components or the sources which must be underpinned, and how should they be managed by the change. And in business as usual, you of course take up multitask or many tasks which are required to be managed by change. So you can see that change management as a practice within a service value chain stage will be called upon multiple times. And that's what's the beauty, where the processes which are now practices, they are much more fulfilling and much more, how should I say, complete, which can be used within the service value chain and be called upon. I'm going to take a quick pause. I'm going to request my colleagues to run this poll. This is just to make sure it's afternoon time, and I just want to know if people are really keeping up with me. And I mean, I also just know that people are also understanding what's being presented. It's a very simple question which kind of tries to find about what are the 4 dimensions, and probably it will, I'm sure the results are going to be like 100 out of 100, but still I'm going to give about another 30 seconds. And Sunil, once you know the result, do tell me.
Yes, Sandeep. So it's going on, but we
All right.
still need people to respond. About 20% have
Okay.
responded.
May I
So
request the rest of the people also to respond in next like 15 seconds? It's a very easy question.
okay, we are now closing the poll.
Sure, Sunil.
So Sandeep, just to give you perspective on the this thing, so I think a lot of the participants were listening very carefully. So partners and suppliers get 76%. Uh,
Awesome, Sunil. Very good. That's
organiz
the correct answer. Yeah.
yeah, organization and governance gets 18% responses, and products and technology get 6%. So maybe
Sure,
it could
Sunil.
be just a quick idea to go back to that slide and just share back saying it's not product and technology. So
Sure,
there is
sure. Yeah, I
clarity.
mean, basically, it's not a product and technology. I mean, I know I was just kind of playing with words here, but just to see the attentiveness, you can see it was more of information and technology, and organization was with people, and so on and so forth. So, but thank you, people. I'm happy that, of course, with your own knowledge, and of course, when you're attentive today listening, that gives me a confidence that yes, we have been sharing and people are listening to it. So, thank you, Sunil, for conducting that poll. Let me quickly go to the next stage. Now, what's also most important to see is that we talked about the people, right? And what kind of skills and resources which are required to conduct or undertake this journey. I mean, if you think in terms of the very simple form, as you say, it's a collaboration and coordination. It's also about the overall knowledge. And if you remember, when we talk about collaboration, one of the most important word, which is currently the buzzword, is a T-shaped profile. The second bullet point, which basically talks about that you must have a broad general knowledge, but you must also have deep specialization. And these are the T-shaped profiles today becoming very, how should I say, a strong footprint of the microservices team, which are really required to deliver value to the customer from end-to-end perspective. And they must be fully aware about how every activity step or an action generates the value, how does it create the value, and how can it be co-created. So not just the focus must be only on value creation, but it also must be done in a co-created manner. In terms of, so this is about the mindset, and this is about the kind of what you want people to do, but it's also important to understand that there might be some requirement of very specific, I mean, in terms of certifications which you may want to think. And I'm pretty sure you're very familiar with this diagram. If you're a V3 professional, you will know there are two different paths which are currently possible. You can take a transition from using MPT, the managing professional transition, and I'm sure there is a color codes which kind of tells you that which stream you want to take. Of course, foundation is at the core. At the bottom, you can see that's where you start from. But then you have a choice of going towards managing professional if you have more of a practitioner and if you are kind of doing things at the semi and maybe leadership skills. Or if you're a senior leadership or a management, then you may want to take a right-hand side path more towards a strategic leader and eventually leading both of them together to the master. And there are obviously like V3, you have credit requirements and they get added up eventually going forward. But as I said, that these are the definitely, because we are talking about ITIL4, I have brought up this picture. But what we must not forget is that ITIL4, for that matter, um, allows integration of many, many more best practices. That means if you are an agile professional, or if you are a professional from service integration and management, or if you are a professional coming from DevOps, those are also the necessary skills which will be required along with such certification. When you talk about T-shaped profile, it's important that you're not just master of one, but you deep dive into one, but you definitely have general knowledge. So it won't harm if I say along with this, it would be nice to have a DevOps foundation done, or Agile foundation done, or service integration foundation done. It will be nice. Yeah, but these are the kind of, I mean, academic parts of it, but they are important because they bring in global terminology, they bring in common knowledge pool, they bring in the simple, most best practices together so as to get it done. So moving on, if you see, now let's talk about a bit in terms of what are the really key steps involved and how do we really go about it. So far, we have seen that what are the new things which have come in because of this best practice, and what are the key, how should I say, the aspects which we must consider during the discovery of the alignment. But we also now know what kind of skills and resources are required. But now we also need to know what exactly could be the key steps I may take right from tomorrow. If I want to really start the journey, what do I do? So I'm not sure, again, my apologies if the screen is a bit small, but I'm going to read it out for you. The first step is saying alignment discovery, which is typically a workshop to understand. First of all, when I say workshop, I mean it's about people of the organization, right from the business sponsor to the senior leadership to the key stakeholders, must come together and try to find out that what does this alignment means to us? Um, why am I going to invest in it? What aspects I must consider? Where do I really stand? So this is like the basic primary step, and it's a short and sweet, maybe a couple of days time spent here, kind of gives you a quick understanding of what's the direction I must take in when I'm going to measure myself or really, really baseline myself in the next step, which is nothing but assessment. And the next step assessment, of course, is a kind of deep dive which can run between 2 to 4 weeks, but it definitely allows you to get to the real data, the actually practices, the people, the transactions which are happening, the different plans, different methodologies, tools. It goes into multi dimensions of assessment. And then based on the outcome of the assessment, which is typically kind of a prioritized roadmap, then you undertake probably the implementation of the change in either a set of small projects or in a large project, multiple steps. And it can be then either a big bang or a phase-wise approach and so on and so forth, and eventually leading to the improvement. So again, not a rocket science. I'm pretty sure the professionals, as you are, you would have managed similar kind of projects in the past, and that would also give you a kind of insight in the way it has to be done. But to just make it a little bit more distinct, I would say that one of the important aspects not to forget when you're thinking about, let's say, an alignment discovery workshop, and these are some of the facts which we have put because we have run such workshops in the past. It's typically a couple of days workshop. It's important that it's interactive and it's pretty context driven. The senior service and delivery teams or the initial champions which could have got, some of them could be right now sitting in this audience. along with the business sponsor, could be the participants. But this must give you on all the aspects we talked about, the four dimensions, the guiding principles, the processing and practice mapping, the service value chain components. It must give you a kind of heat map. It should tell you, okay, here I'm red, I'm a green, here I'm amber, so this is what I need to do. Here I'm completely aligned, and so on and so forth. It also should allow you to do a great identification of the priority areas and kind of give you a quick roadmap of what are the activities going to be now, or what are the activities going to be soon, or what are the activities which are going to be later. So this is important, and also one must be able to know what could be the timeline and efforts. As a matter of fact, on the right-hand side of the screen, what you're seeing on the top is our brochure for a complete two-day workshop. And I would be happy to share that with you guys if you're interested for us to come and conduct this workshop with you. Because this gives a complete clear-cut baseline of what you are, plus it gives you prioritized actions and roles and responsibilities which can be undertaken by you. So at the end of this, if you already shared your details, or I'm pretty sure you must have registered for this, then we are happy to share this with you. Now, this is the first step out of, I mean, if I go back really one stage, you can see that this is a first step out of the four steps. And the next step would be the assessment, right? And in this assessment is really a good deep dive. It's, as I said, like 2 to 4 week exercise. And it has got a very complete data-driven methodology. There is a documentation to be seen. The field observations are done. You meet a lot of interview and sit down with the teams and get the exact idea. You involve the delivery teams, entire front end teams, as well as the back end teams, and get the leadership also to talk. Now, what does this give you very clearly and distinctly is that one, it gives you a complete understanding of your quantitative gap assessment. And when I say quantitative assessment, it will tell you like you are 3.2 out of 5 in this particular practice, and you're at let's say 4.2 in organization people, and so on and so forth. It also gives you a readiness view in the sense is the organization ready for this change, and which aspect really is missing, or which aspect is really there. What you see on the right hand side, the small set of smileys, is basically nothing but 5 key parameters of change, which means basically, do you have the necessity? Do you really have the vision for it? Do you have plan, resources, and competence? And it answers all those 5 in terms of quantitative as well as qualitative assessment. And it also gives you a complete roadmap and prioritization in terms of what are going to be my quick wins, and how this will generate more and more value to my customer. So assessment is a very fulfilling exercise which has to be done post the discovery. And post this, of course, you can go into implementation as well as the improvement, but that can be happening post the first 2 stages. Now, my intention of also sharing a bit of detail about the first 2 stages is because we have already the ready-to-go products for both of them. We have already the one pager which I showed you, similar pager, one pager is available for such assessment. Depending upon your organization need, of course, you are completely using what we are going to share now. You can do this yourself, but we are happy to kick in case we think our organization can help you to get this done. Now, let's also answer one more poll, just to get a quick understanding of how many of you might be interested in doing so. So may I request you, Sunil, to run the poll?
Yes, Sandeep, the poll is running now.
Oh, thank you, Sunil. I'm just going to have a bit of water. Give me a couple of seconds.
Okay, requesting everyone to just answer one of the options in the poll. Yeah, thank you for participating. Please continue with your options. We will give you another few more minutes, or maybe a 1 minute.
Yeah, sure, Sunil.
Okay, thank you for participating. We are closing the poll now. So it looks pretty interesting, Sandeep, from our perspective. I think they're showing a lot of organizations are moving in to the ITIL4 alignment. Obviously, some of them now, some of them later, but most of them are in a stage where they are not sure. So which means that typically, since the ITIL4 is absolutely new, there is a little bit of a confusion around it, as I was saying in my introduction. So it'll take them a little bit more time. That's what most companies are saying. It's not immediate. They want to settle down. They want to understand what's the impact, and then move into ITIL4. So this is the
Awesome.
response to the poll. Yeah.
Thank you, Sunil. Thank you so much. And I mean, it's perfectly fine. I always say that if you are trying to take a path which is new, and if you feel uncertain about it, you're at the right place. I mean, if you're overconfident, if you're very sure, then I would be surprised. And many of my customers, where I started this journey with, as a matter of fact, discovery was a key workshop for them, because some of the customers said, yes, now we want to go for it with much more open clarity. And that discovery workshop, alignment and discovery workshop, helped them to actually know why are they going to take this journey, how are they going to benefit from it. So yes, I understand, and thank you, Sunil, for sharing the poll. Now let me quickly go to the one of the last, of course, but not least point, is in terms of how do I really make sure that after doing all this, how can I make my services to deliver maximizing the value? And it's important that we are delivering this value to the customer. But one of the important aspects which has changed in ITIL4 is that the relationship between the service provider and consumer is no more monodirectional and distant. It's not that the service provider is sitting in his office 5,000 miles across or 15,000 miles across. It is you work together. The work is more collaborative, the work is more co-creation, and the value has to be in the same form. That means defining your relationship with the customer, redefining them in such a manner where customer will be not only being brought in just for gathering requirements, but also for co-creation of service. And you'll be surprised that even during provisioning of service, customer is willing to take some responsibility so that it can actually benefit from actually the value generation point of view. Also, you must understand the relationships over a period of time are becoming highly complex. And because of the multitudes of service providers involved, there is a plenty of interdependency. That means the service integration and management, the key handoff movement between the partners, the formation of microservices team within organization and across organization is becoming more and more key. This is one of the underlying principles of making sure that the service value chain is adapted to, because that's how you keep adding the value, and eventually the value is offered to the customer in a co-creative manner. So it's very important to understand the interdependency and the service relationship. It's also important to understand that what is that my organization is actually contributing to which component of the value, because collaboration can be only done if there are I would say complementing capabilities coming across the different service components or different partners within the journey. And one must also continuously actively seek mutually beneficial or interactive relationships where allowing the customer to continuously be co-creative and making sure that they have become a distinct part of value chain is very important. So this is one of the, I think, important message which I want to leave in your mind before we close, that it's about co-creation, it's about collaboration, it's about making sure that the customer is involved, and it's also making sure that we are more focused from the service value chain and not just about process execution. It's not just about following the workflows, but it's about making sure that every little stage, every little team, every little action taken by our organization is adding value as we progress further. So in summarize, I think it's important to understand what has changed. You should know how this change has affected me as a service provider, or if I'm an end customer as a consumer. you must undertake a discovery workshop, even if it's internally, to find out in all those aspects of the either the dimensions or in terms of service value chain or in terms of guiding principle, where do we stand? Undertake a clear-cut assessment so that you will know qualitatively and quantitatively where we stand. And of course, in this due process, then initiate the formation of teams and getting the teams to be ready, and the people also are academically qualified so that they can take up this journey together. With this, I think I'm going to bring a close to this session. I'm not sure how much time we have, but maybe I think about 5 minutes we have maybe for Q&A. So I guess you guys can type in or in your chat the questions you may have, and we'll try to take a few of those. And I'm going to request my colleague Sunil to read out some of the key ones so I can answer them.
Okay, thank you, Sandeep. So I think it's interesting overall the questions. It is also very clear from the kind of questions we received, a lot of questions, that people are still not really clear the way forward. They still feel it's a minor upgrade from ITIL version 3 to 4. So that's one. Let me pick up a few questions. So one of the question, which is probably from John, he talks about what would be a typical assessment framework if you want to look at an ITIL4 assessment framework. Can you talk a little bit more on that?
Sure, I can. And thank you for the question, John. I mean, the typical assessment, I mean, if you ask me where I will start, uh, and I personally believe this is one of the main place one should start with is the guiding principles, because every best practice, if you see, if it is following those guiding principles, it's more likely chance that they may not have the construct, or they may not have the, how should I say, the very specific instruments of conducting that best practice, but they would definitely have the outcomes or the impact which is required. That will come via ensuring that the guiding principles are followed. There is no way that if you're following those guiding principles, you may not be closer to the best practice. So if you ask me where would it start, it will definitely start from the guiding principles. From there, it will probably go to the dimensions alignment, and then I will come back to the service value chain and its construct, and probably then I will close out on the continual improvement. So that would be the direction I will take. Start on guiding principles first, follow it through with the dimensions, then follow with service value chain, and then go out with the improvement and governance. I hope I answered that question for you, John.
Yeah, so thanks, Sandeep. One quick question, which I think multiple people are asking, is what kind of amendments do we need to do from a process documentation perspective? So if you want to align from ITIL V3, if there is some document, and I'm not talking about ISO 20000, I'm talking more on the generic documentation, what typically would change in them, and what kind of updates would be required?
Sure. So, I mean, it's a good question, and thank you for the question who has been asked. And you said multiple people. So, if you distinctly see the way I see a process document now to be represented as a practice, it doesn't, process document by itself doesn't really change. I would say what gets added to these are the 4 dimensions. For example, if I talk in, let's say, for example, let's still take the concept of the change management, right? And change management version 3 document, what it would have had, it would have the goal, scope, objective, it would have the, let's say, the workflow, the procedure which was describing the workflow, and then probably the roles and the KPIs, and then probably that's it, right? Now here you will find that it will get added with, let's say, for starting with, let's say, the information and technology. So one of the things which may get added in that side would be what kind of information is being captured during the change control. When is the change control applicable if the information is changing? Or what kind of technology currently is used? What kind of tools are available? Do we want to make a single tool, constitutional for a simple policy change, a document change, or an incident management oriented change? So this distinct differentiation in that dimension would get added. Either you can add it as a section to the document itself to make it more going towards the practice, or this could be within an additional annex which will explain this in detail. And this will happen for each of its, I would say, dimension. So if you ask me, the distinct change which may happen would be definitely getting those 4 dimensions added to each of the process document to bring it to a, I would say, a step closer to the practice. Not it still may not be it's completely all, but at least it's the first step which will take it towards being more called as a practice than the process. I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, Sandeep, thank you for that. Another question that has been coming is people who have done ITIL V3. This is probably not related directly, but people who had done V3 some time back. So I again have multiple questions. Somebody has done it in 15 and 16 and 17, some 18, and they've just done foundation only. What would you prefer them do? So if they have to move from V3 to 4, is it that they read something and upgrade themselves, or the changes are so much that probably they need to go through the whole course again? What would you recommend?
When you say whole course, which whole course? The foundation you're saying?
Yes, so they've only done foundation, the V3 foundation some years back.
Okay.
From 2000, I think there are questions from 2013, 14 onwards. So people have done in 14 till about 18. So the question they're asking is how many, what is the impact of changes basically, if I might rephrase that, and is it a kind of a bridge upgrade that they can read, or is it quite substantial that it's better that they attend a formal course and get recertified?
Okay, so if you ask me, is it possible to undertake, let's say, the new foundation academic qualification per se for exam? Then, of course, you need to have access to the right material and undertake the course. But it's not a drastic change. As I said, the components which we discussed just now, the 4 dimensions or the service value system, as well as service value chain and its components, and the guiding principle along with the practices, if you briefly understand these 4 core concept which I discussed, this is a major change. Holistically, it hasn't really, I mean, at the core, it hasn't really changed. As I said at the start, it's the approach and the philosophy has changed. The way definitions were done or key definitions, they have changed. So definitely, I would say it's at least not less than 30%. Definitely 30% would have changed. But at the same time, if you look from the other side, 70% is still common. And that's a good heartening story. So from the people who have done it in the past, I will still encourage them to take the foundation as a course. It's not just because that you may not be capable of passing it academically, but there's plenty of new things to learn, and that will be a nice way to go. And those, of course, who have done their expert in the past, they can, of course, take the MPT route, which you can see on the screen, the managing professional, because you have the 17 credits, and you can always come to that route to come towards the managing professional. But I would say those who have done foundation, there is no harm in doing the foundation again, and I would encourage you to do so. Not because you may not be capable or you may not be able to do it on your own, but I would say that it will be definitely enriching experience to do so. Hey, thank you, Sunil.
Okay, I think we can take one last question. Again, there are multiple questions. We'll try to handle it one on one, but this is interesting. This is about the tooling. And again, there are multiple questions, so I'm paraphrasing. So the question is that we've not really heard too much about a tool guy launching a ITIL4 version, wherein when 3 came in, there was a big rush when the tool guys were running around and saying we are ITIL V3 aligned. So the question is typically, do you think there would be a big impact on updates on the tool? Would the tool really change in alignment with V4, and what would be the impact of change?
Sure. Thank you for that question. And yes, there will be impact on the tool. And you're absolutely right about people announcing the version which is in double quotes to be the V4 versions of the tool. The reason being is that they're waiting for all the documents from the best practices to be published. And the reason being that is that each one of these, how the tool will be impacted, it will be impacted in 3 different dimensions. One, at the data capture stage. That means today, for incident management per se as a process, if this tool has been capturing a set of data, now considering the incident management as a practice, it may be expected to capture more contextual data and not just the transactional data. That means coming from different four dimensions, it might also want to associate those contextual information to the same incident ticket, and that might have to be captured. So one, what would change? Definitely the data capture parameters will change. Second, it will also definitely change certain KPIs. When I say KPIs, the performance of a particular, I would say, individual or an organization entity, or for that matter, let's say a ticket itself, if it is going through multimodal support and it's going through multi-agency, then there would be a better methodology to track its ownership and its movement and its traceability. And that is being understood at this point in time because the KPIs would definitely change. I mean, so far it has been prevalent practice to have end-to-end KPI assigned to only from start to origin to one service provider, and it was very difficult to counter or rather measure in between process and progress. I think now it will become of paramount importance to be able to measure the multi-agency involvement in performing a single streak of a service value chain. So definitely that would change. And the third thing which would change also, according to me, is the dashboards, because the set of stakeholders expecting certain aspects of the value and its distinct differentiation of definition between the outcomes and the outputs, and as well as the impact, all as well as the benefit, all four are distinctly being defined. There will be definitely a requirement to change the way the dashboards are produced and analytical information is being presented. So from the, again, coming back from the tool standpoint, you may not find many V4, but I can definitely tell you there are a couple of them who have already started making change, and they are very much careful about in terms of how they are packaging at this moment. But definitely data capture, the measurement of KPI, and the dashboard would change. And of course, additionally, for certain new practices which got introduced, you may find additional workflows being integrated and also interoperability between the tools, because there are going to be instances where the agile and DevOps tools might have to talk to the service management tool and the project management tool and architecture tool and so on and so forth. So there could be some more flexible integration or information exchange on a common protocols, and that's very much on the cards because I've been talking to a couple of tool suppliers, and they already given indication that that's currently being under the consideration. So these are the facts which will change from the tool standpoint. I hope I answer your question.
Okay, I'll take one more for just for the type of question. So one of the question query is how can we learn more about the alignment? So I think that's an open question. So maybe you can, let me take that because that's close. So the alignment that we talked today is at a higher level. Obviously, this is a webinar. Sandeep talked about a 2-day alignment workshop, which is going into details about how the whole thing gets done. It's a hands-on session which kind of tells you how to do it, and then you can go back and kind of align that. So you see on the right side, the first course is being launched on the 19th and the 20th of February. All of you will get a link to that, so you can see what is covered and how, what depth is going to go in, what you need to be prepared before you join in, because you need to get some some base data so that you can kind of play around with it as we go along and create your own specific planning. So at the end of day 2, you have a you have much better clarity of what the next steps would be on ITIL4. Obviously, when you go back and you start implementing, that was the whole idea. So we will be launching that on 19-20th Feb. The reason why we're not launching it, that there is still some alignment to be done. As Sandeep was saying, there is a little bit on the tooling which we've included there, and right now the release has not yet happened. So we are kind of working with some of the vendors to get that piece aligned as well, so it becomes a little more holistic rather than launching it. Plus the other couple of books that Exelos has committed to be out by February will be out as well. So we want to reconfirm that we have covered all aspects in our assessment as well. So that's where the launch date is, 19th and 20th of February. Yeah, Sandeep, so that I think there are, as I said, a lot of still more questions, but we don't have time. So thank you guys for being with us for more than an hour. And thank you, Sandeep, for making this possible. I'd also like to thank the marketing team, Neha and her team, for putting this together and working this out on a specific day. And I'm happy they were close to all people from almost 14 countries who joined in today at different timings. Some of them in the morning, some probably